Hey guys, Quiv, the Lazy Geek here, and today I want to talk about this. This is the Hobym Observatory Crux 140 Traveler mount, which is a pretty amazing mount, and I want to give my first impressions of it after having used it for roughly a month, a bit more maybe, occasionally, and what I like about it and what I do not like about it. And so let's get started. So if we look at this mount, it comes in a great little package here with a very nice carrying case, which came with a lot of stuff inside. I'm not even going to list everything that came inside, but we have stuff like obviously the connection cables. There's a USB-A to USB-A cable here that can be used to connect to the mount. There's a car battery cable here. There's a serial cable for other ways to connect. There's Allen wrench and screws, and there's the controller, the Titan controller from Hobym, which contains all of the electronics to control the mount. And we have, at least in my package, I had to attach to the counterweight bar this, so I can actually attach a camera on the other side of the counterweight bar, so we can have a dual scope setup. I have a counterweight bar for the mount, and we also have a normal counterweight. And the counterweight, if I manage to remove it, it's hard. Oop, here it is. I don't even know how much it weighs, but I'd say 1.5 kilos, something like that. It's a very nice little compact counterweight. And then we have the actual mount. And the actual mount looks like this. It's 3 kilograms. It's very light. It's very small, and yet it can carry my 8-inch Newtonian. In theory, it needs counterweights for that. It needs that single counterweight here, but I've totally used it without a counterweight with my 8-inch Newtonian and all its astrophotography equipment on top, which is something like 8 or 9 kilograms. So it is quite impressive. And it does, you know, it's like the length of my, I don't know if that's my forearm or my arm. I never know in English, but whatever. It's quite small. It's quite light overall, and it packs quite a punch. The reason that it can carry so much without counterweights is that it uses strain wave drives, which are usually known as harmonic drives, even though I think harmonic is actually just a brand name. And they have much more teeth of the gears that are engaged at any given time than like a standard worm type drive, and so they can carry a lot more weight without counterweights. The drawback I've seen is that it does seem to use quite a lot of battery to actually keep tracking with that mount. Okay, so let me put that on a tripod to show you a bit how we can adjust it. Okay, so here we have a beautiful tripod. This is a carbon fiber tripod from Vixen, which is made to carry the Vixen AXJ, which is like something like 15 kilogram mount. So it will carry this Crux mount without issues. I added an adapter that's sold in Japan to convert it to a standard 3/4 of an inch camera thread, and then I can just screw in that mount without any issues. Now, one of the things though, if you're going to use a mount with a big scope without counterweights, there will be a lot of unbalance on the tripod itself. So you need a beefy tripod, and this tripod is very light but very beefy, and you can see it has an integrated spreader, which for me was one of the main reasons I got this particular tripod over others. There are other tripod manufacturers around that are almost specific to those strain wave drive kind of mounts that make very, very beefy tripods with a center column, for example, in manufacturers in Korea. And this mount is a Korean mount. And but this carbon fiber tripod from Vixen for me was much cheaper. It's very beefy, and I think it's the best compromise for this. So let me put it on. Okay, so I'm just going to screw the mount in. Okay, so now the mount is in, and we can start the actual setup. Now, to adjust the azimuth, altitude of the mount to do the actual polar line, there's this particular screw, and there's the locking mechanism here, which we can lock and unlock. This is threaded, right? So it takes me quite a bit of time to get to my proper latitude. And there's actually somewhere in there, and let me show you. Here, there's a little bolt that can be adjusted that basically can be used to set the guideline to your latitude, right? So the moment that this bolt is hit is when I know that I'm in the correct vicinity of my own latitudes, right? So I am doing this, and obviously because there's no polar scope, in the end you'll want to use something like Sharp Cap polar line, which I cannot stop recommending to perform the final polar alignment. But now that we are almost in contact, and now we are in contact with that bolt, I know that in the correct vicinity. So I think it was made for that, to have a way of remembering where we are. Now we can look at the azimuth adjustment. So there's two locking screws for the azimuth adjustment. There's this one, and there's another one on the other side that you can see through the mount here. I have my finger on it. Now those, they are made to be like used with fingers, but actually I found that when they're just finger tight, the mount can wobble from side to side. So let me unfasten them a bit. And I'm going to use the Allen wrench that came with the equipment to do so. It can be very hard, so I like to carry gloves with me, like grip gloves, to basically work with this mount on the field. So now it's very loose, and it can totally move side to side, as you can see when it's very loose. And if it's finger tight, you'll see this movement as well. So this is something you really want to tighten. So with all of that, one of the things to know is that when you tighten everything here, you have the polar line will be slightly off, and which is something that you need to realize with this mount, and that's kind of like the way things are. If I look at the side of the mount itself, we can see we have also the azimuth adjusting screws, which are like a standard set of screws as you would expect. There, all of the screws are very smooth, very nice travel, very easy to use. It feels like, you know, fine quality, and for the price of that mount, it better be. So very, very easy. You also have like the angles here to help you if necessary. And once you're done with the alignment, you can just, you know, tighten those knobs, and I would even recommend going at it with the Allen wrench to make sure that this is all well tightened. Otherwise, as you saw, you could have a little wobble, which, while it might not be noticeable when you're just like setting up, when you have an 8-incher or an SCT on top of this, suddenly it becomes much more noticeable. And now we are adjusted, we are ready to actually mount something on this mount. So let's do that together. So this is what I'm going to mount. It's a very small, very compact and very light kind of Vixen style dovetail. And the screws there are the perfect size. One thing to note is that the depths of this thing, I haven't really measured it, but it's not super deep, so you want to make sure that your screws here do not exceed like those roughly 10 millimeters. that we see here. And then it's just a matter of screwing that in like kind of as usual. So we want to make sure that it's well secure, especially when you think that this little dovetail could carry a big instrument like an 8-inch Newtonian. And here we are. Okay, so now I am properly set. I can use this to actually fit some equipment on top. Note that I can also add, and here is the link to the actual controller of the mount, and this little knob there is something that can be unscrewed to screw back an actual counterweight bar. Okay, now we can mount the counterweight for the heck of it. And that counterweight is very long, obviously, so it can actually go quite down onto the counterweight shaft. So here is how far down this counterweight will go relative to the shaft. So it's a standard, well-designed kind of counterweight system that will really go all the way down. And let's put something on top. I'm gonna just put this lens on top, which is what I want to use for my standard kind of imaging runs. And here we are. So now my mount is ready. I can just connect my controller here and put this on. Oh, and now I noticed that first time I see that actually it's much easier to plug that in before you put on the counterweight. But we have a serial kind of cable here. We're just gonna put it in there, and then we can start the controller. Now the controller itself is a bit like kind of not super ergonomic. I find that it's quite hard to actually get a good handle on it, and especially since when I started the manual was not up to date. The manual was saying that you turn it on, you move the wheel like that very fast, it will open the menu. It's no longer the case. Now you need to actually do a long press on this button. So it has changed a little bit. And let me give it some power. So for power, I'm gonna use this, which is a 12 volt or like multiple choice. I'll set it to 12 volt battery with 40 amp hours at the lowest of, I think it's 3.7 volts. And we're gonna turn this on. Okay, and now the whole power is actually coming through the controller to the mount. So the mount is actually getting the power through the controller here. The normal way of doing things is very simple. You just choose the speed with that little knob that we have here, and then you can just slew. The slew is very quiet, very nice. It's like barely audible. Very, very nice. Yep, so that's the basics of using it. You can make it remember a parking position so that when I turn it off, it will automatically go back to that parking position, which you can choose to be whichever you like. But this will only work when the mount is actually synced. And to sync the mount, you can point it to a star and then use the sync function. So you need to know what star you're talking about. Or you could say, like, I pointed the mount to the western horizon and sync the mount to the west. And then once it's synced on one target, it doesn't do a model. It's not a multiple star line. It's a very simple one star sync. It will just remember that and have the whole sky model based on that. So it's not super precise, and I would say it's not really meant for imaging, for visual. Even though this mount can actually be used as an Alt-as mount as well. You have an Alt-as mount somewhere in this menu. The menu is obviously available in English. You can choose an object, for example. We could say that we want to go and look at the sun, and it's just going to slew to the sun. So very, you know, the standard kind of way of using a scope. You can see the coordinates being updated here. Everything is, you know, working as expected. I'll show you in a moment what happens when you put a C9.25 was it on top of this. It's extremely scary, but it actually moves. Okay, so the mount is there. It's working quite well, and we can, yeah, I always forget, how do I go back to, yes, like it can get really weird to go back to previous menus. You have multiple settings. You can set it in landscape mode. You can do time lapse because there's an actual like shutter release here for DSLRs. Tons of stuff that can be done with this mount. There's a permanent periodic error correction, which is not supposed to be easy with those drives. I've personally tested it and I did not find much of a difference, but you can actually train the mount via the guide commands. There's a Bluetooth option here. You can connect to this mount via Bluetooth, or you can connect to it via Wi-Fi with a firmware update. So lots of, you know, things that are available in here, and overall, you know, it's a usable interface, and when you connect to your computer, everything's working pretty well. Now with my sample of the mounts, and I'm not sure what is wrong, but and this is something I need to use and test again, I got lots of disconnection between the mounts and my computer, whether I was using Bluetooth, USB, serial, or any of those methods. I think I may have found a solution, but I am still not quite sure. Now let's have a look at how it works when you have a bigger scope on top of it. And here we are. How utterly terrifying is this? So I'm gonna go back to my controller and turn it on, and we're gonna slew to the sun with this little tiny puny counterweight. This is a C9.25. It's just slewing. No issues, no problem. It's nothing. It weighs nothing, which I find kind of crazy. But we're not at the end of our trials and tribulations here. We're gonna use it, and this is not recommended even by the manufacturer, but we're gonna try it with no counterweights. So let me set it back to the parking spot first, because I don't want to just remove the counterweight while it's in such an unbalanced position. But let's try this. Okay, and here we are. Let's remove this. Because I'm crazy, I'm actually going to completely remove the counterweight shaft, which barely weighs anything, by the way. So that's a big difference from many of the other counterweight shafts. We have the mount on its own, no counterweight, a C9.25 I think, on top, and we are going to go to the sun. It feels like it's struggling a little bit, right? But no problem, no big issue. This, what you're seeing here, is what this mount is all about. It's, you do not need counterweights, which is great. So you're not buying precision with this mount. That's something that's very important to understand here. What you're buying is this ability to slew like crazy without any counterweights. So you minimize the amount of stuff that you need to bring with you and the weight of the stuff you need to bring with you. And look at this. Look at this. This should be illegal, right? And I'm just going to bring it back to parking position because I'm about to have a heart attack. But it just, I have no words. This is completely crazy, right? And it sounds so smooth too. One of the things I've noticed though is that it eats up battery. Like, I have not measured the actual consumption, but I see my battery consumption. We were at 90% a couple of minutes ago. We are 88%. With a normal mount, with my Vixen or my EQ6R, I wouldn't still be at 90%. It would barely move throughout the night, maybe like 10%. This thing will empty this battery overnight, so it's very hungry for power. And with great power comes great responsibility. So it is responsible for this little scope here and has tons of security features to avoid hitting it on the tripod, because can you imagine with that much torque this hitting the tripod and just keep turning and turning? It would do it. It has enough power to do it. It's super scary. So it comes with tons of security features to avoid just that scenario. I have not had an issue with that, even using it remotely, while I had left it alone on the balcony with my 8-inch Newtonian on top and no counterweight, and I was controlling it from downstairs in my living room. So this is like how the mount slews, how it feels like. I think it's pretty good overall in terms of the overall feel. There's a few weaknesses in terms of, for example, it's a single star line, which is fine for astrophotography because you're going to do plate solving, but which is much less fine for visual, because then you need perfect polar line, or you'll be like kind of messed up all over the place. One of the other disadvantages I found, and I think I fixed it, is the stability of the connection to the PC. And again, I haven't seen other users having this issue, so I can only report what is happening to me. Now let's talk precision. And precision is where this mount has issues, at least for me. So to give you guys a better idea of how the mount performs in terms of guiding and backlash in depth, let me show you a bit of a video as well as some screenshots from my guiding that I took with this mount inside, with using just a 200mm lens on it, so very small, lightweight, not a problem at all for this mount thing. And you will see me, I will be pressing, this is the ASCOM driver, I'll be pressing the north and south movements, and you will see there's some weird acceleration, deceleration going around. So let me play this for you. You can see we're going north, and now we're reversing direction, and it's slow, and then it stops, and then it accelerates. You can see that. This is what I'm talking about. And now north again, it doesn't move at first, then it's slow, and then finally it's at the normal speed, and there's a bit of stickiness to that. And same, south, going a bit, stopping, and then we go on again. This is the issue that I have with this mount. There's something with the deck axis that seems to be wrong, that seems to be like flawed somewhere, at least in my sample of the mount. And to show you how this looks like for the guiding, let's have a quick look. This is the very first time that I attempted to guide with this mouse. You can see I'm getting almost 4.5 arc seconds of RMS. It doesn't make any sense. I was using 3 seconds exposures at the time, and you can see that it's just all over the place. I was like, what is this? What did I buy when I first guided with this mount? This is with a 200mm lens. This is not with a high payload. And you can see what I'm talking about in terms of the deck backlash here on the guiding calibration results. In theory, you would see like points going outwards and then points going inwards for more or less the same distance, except if you have a lot of backlash, which we have something equivalent to backlash here, even though mechanically it should not be backlash with a strain wave gear, but who knows? I don't know, I am not mechanically inclined, but you can see that the going back to the center kind of failed with those white dots here. They only went like a fourth, maybe a fifth of the way, when they should have gone like at least like 80% of the way, even with significant backlash. And you can see what is happening here in terms of the deck backlash that I'm mentioning. Now the RA axis doesn't have that issue, because RA you just need to stop it. You don't need to actually make it go in the other direction, so there's no problems of backlash in RA. But deck, for me, from my sample of the mount, is very affected, and it affects, you can see on this guiding portion here on the left,
that we're getting tons of spikes to try to get it back, and then it just, you know, it takes its little sweet time. And if you think back to the video that I just showed of the recording with this acceleration kind of visible and this thickness is visible, it all makes sense. Deck is, if you're well polar aligned, is not an issue for guiding, but for dithering, it's going to be an issue. So I dither RA only because of that. And let's look at another picture, which is this one, where we can see that now I've changed my guiding settings. It still was my 200 millimeters lens. I've changed my guiding settings to be using 0.5 second exposures as per the advice from the manufacturer of the mount. And we're getting much better results. We're getting 1.5 RMS, which is actually something that I sometimes get with my EQ6R when I have very bad seeing, which is often the case here in Tokyo. But you can still see, like, the deck axis, we try to pull it back in this like area highlighted in green, and it just doesn't want to be pulled back. So really you need great, absolutely great polar align. It's still a much better result, and this is workable, especially at lower focal length. Now, I wanted to put it through a torture test as well, so this is what I did. I put my 8-inch Newtonian scope on it with no counterweight. It's completely ridiculous. And the worst part is it actually works. It makes no sense whatsoever. This is when you think, like, this is an incredible little mount. It's just, yeah, some issues here and there. And to be fair, with this setup on that night, I was getting around 1 arcsecond RMS, maybe 1.13. My resolution here is actually 1 arcsecond per pixel with this camera, and it worked pretty well in that I got a decent picture out of it. And this is the result that I got. Actually, some of the frames were taken with my EQ6R. Most of them were taken with the Hobym mount, and it's not perfect, but it's not bad at all. And forgive the low image quality, this is a white zone. So, in the end, what are my impressions of this mount? And I will say, I'm very conflicted on that, because this is not the first time I've recorded this conclusion, and I still don't know what my conclusion is going to be. It's very well machined, it's very well built, it's beautiful, it's very light, it can carry a crazy payload without needing counterweights, it's very portable, it's great. It's just like the precision is really an issue for me, in that it's been, I can get good guiding out of it if I get very short guiding exposures, but the declination axis has an issue, as far as I can tell. And one of the things as well is I've asked on Facebook about that to the manufacturer directly, and they were, you know, helpful in trying to solve the issue, but really in the end they're very proud of their mount, with good reason. It's a beautiful mount, but so they were saying, like, okay, we use like the same motors that Takahashi uses, we use like the highest grade components, etc. So our mount is awesome, which it's true. But there's still that deck problem, and one of the things that the manufacturer mentioned was that they were using, you know, Maxim DL, and they don't have any issues with deck dithering, that kind of stuff. But, you know, I see there's an obvious issue in deck. Some of the other users don't have it, so I don't know, like, whether it's unique to me or not. And if it is, you know, the manufacturer in the end, the answer was, you know, the proof is in the pudding. If you take good images with the mount, it means the mount is fine. If you don't take good images with the mount, then we'll try to help you, kind of thing, which is logic that I kind of understand, but it's not something that I'm used to in terms of a mount that costs a premium like this. And so on this front, I'm kind of, you know, disappointed, and I hope I can use the mount some more in the near future, once COVID-19 has like quieted down a bit, to see how much performance I can get out of it.
And yeah, it's very conflicted feelings about this mount. On the one side, it's an amazing piece of engineering. On the other hand, it's disappointing in terms of precision, at least to me, from my first impressions. And maybe taking further images down the line will help me build a better impression of this mount, or on the contrary, kind of like reinforce me in my bad feeling about that precision issue. So I think that's it for now. I hope you liked this video. If you did like it, click like and please subscribe. I'll be showing off some more gear review. There's processing videos coming up. The 533 MC Pro from ASI with results from a white zone is coming up as well. So to not miss that, please subscribe. Thanks again for watching. I hope this was useful, and see you next time.